Justin Trudeau looks set to make Alberta the boogeyman of Confederation to win re-election. In the last week, he's talked about just transition and carbon capture. And in both cases, he's talked about how stubborn Alberta's being and not getting into the environmental programs that his government has come up with. Just transition is an idea that the federal government can spend a few $1 billion helping oil and gas workers transition to jobs in the new green energy sector, wind power, solar panels, those sorts of things. And carbon capture is the idea that we're going to take carbon dioxide from industrial processes out of the atmosphere and either use it for something more purposeful or pump it into the ground. Neither one of these ideas, just transition or carbon capture, is going to save the planet. Neither one is particularly practical. They sound like great ideas, and you can certainly get an awful lot of voters who don't understand either one of them to say, oh, that sounds really good, let's do that. Why isn't Alberta on board? And that's what Trudeau's counting on. Just transition is the idea that we could take perhaps 150 to 180,000 Alberta workers and retrain them to install solar panels on people's roofs or to look for maintenance projects at wind farms, fixing the turbines. If that could happen, it can't. There aren't enough of those. There are never going to be enough solar panels and wind farms to absorb all of the workers from oil and gas. If that could happen, though, the big problem with it is you're never going to be able to pay people that well. They make a lot of money in oil and gas. They're not going to make a lot of money in green energy. And the proof is in Ontario. A lot of the same people who are architects of the current just transition with the federal government worked for the McGuinty and Wynne governments in Ontario in the 2010s under the Green Energy Act that Ontario had. That jacked up energy prices for Ontario consumers by twice, by double. And it cost about 200,000 manufacturing jobs. How many green jobs were created as a result? Well, the Auditor General of Ontario at the time said about 12,000. So for every 6 jobs lost, there was 1 new job, and it didn't pay quite as well as the other jobs in manufacturing, but who cares? We're saving the planet. But the killer with the Ontario idea was there were no net emission savings. They weren't saving the planet. They were simply ruining the manufacturing sector in Ontario. And just transition for oil and gas workers in Alberta is going to work very much the same way. It's probably going to be even worse. And what about carbon capture? Well, Alberta is already the national leader in carbon capture. I think carbon capture is kind of useless myself. But Alberta leads the way in carbon capture. It's already spent several $1 billion in the last decade encouraging businesses to capture the carbon from their industrial processes and either use it for things like fertilizer or pump it into the ground where it can't get into the atmosphere and potentially cause climate change. Trudeau knows this, but he also knows that his voting base in Toronto, Montreal, Ottawa, and Vancouver don't know that. And so it's really easy for him to say, oh, Alberta is un-Canadian. You have to re-elect me to save the country from them. Now, that is really a dangerous way for a national leader to behave. It really creates a rift in national unity. But that's the Trudeau way. For Post Media, I'm Lorne Gunter.